Okay, let's get started. It's time to start. I want to do prayer needs. First of all, obviously, we want to remember the Lively family and their time that they're going through, the loss of Mr. Bobby. And if you don't know of all the arrangements, the visitation period will be from 4:30 to 7 here tomorrow night, and the funeral at 1 o'clock Tuesday, and it's also here. So if you'd like to come be a part of that, Miss Jan, are we okay on our meal for Tuesday? Okay, bring icing on cakes. Yeah, bring the cake with the icing. Yeah. Miss Barbara, just to update you, Miss Barbara, does Barbara go by Washington? Is that her last name? She does go. Okay, Joe's daughter. She is in the hospital. They found her fainted or passed out this week on Thursday morning, I think it was. And anyway, she is in the Ochsner's Hospital, South Monroe, and she's on a ventilator. She has a lot of breathing issues anyway, and not doing real well. But they're hoping this week to get her off of a ventilator, and she is in South Monroe. So let's keep her and that family in our prayers. And who? Yes, Ashley Gregory. I knew I was thinking someone else there. Ashley, for those of you that don't know, Ashley Gregory was at the hospital this week. One hospital says she had COVID. The other hospital says she doesn't have COVID. So we're not really sure about the COVID thing, but she's had headaches and a lot of chest pain. Come find out Friday, they believe she had a light heart attack. And so they did a heart cath on her today. Didn't find any blockages that needed to be a stent put in it or anything like that. So they're not really sure what's causing it all. And so that's a little bit unsettled. But it looks like, I guess she still had a heart attack, but there's just not any blockages. So if you would keep Ashley and Corey in your prayers. They are kind of quarantined too, so remember that about them. And then for those of you that remember Brother Ray Mears, it was here. I found out this afternoon that Brother Ray they have determined he has MDS. MDS is a type of bone cancer, and there's no cure for it. And so there's nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do for that. And there may be some little treatments that can maybe postpone any kind of, but it is a terminal sickness. And so we just don't know how long. He's been having some pain issues, fatigue issues, breathing issues, and a lot like COVID, sounds like COVID, but this is not good. And so he asks for our prayers. So let's remember him. Okay? Is there anyone else before we pray? Okay. What kind of problems? Okay. You didn't get kicked in the head by a cow, did you? Because my little dog got kicked in the head by a cow this week, and that's what it was doing. I'm just putting symptoms together, and so that's why I'm not a doctor. You don't remember it. Well, that's good. We wouldn't want you to remember something that bad. Okay. Who else? Lisa? Huh? No? Okay. Yeah. Do y'all know Miss Patience Coon? If you hadn't got to know Miss Patience, please get to know her. Her husband Andy and I went to Riser together. Now Riser's not Balkanville. Let's get that straight. I mean, we across the levee. All of y'all have been straightening me out on the levee separating Balkanville and Brownsville and Siegel Edition and all that kind of stuff.
Shelley wants to know, was the dairy still running when y'all went to
Shelley. I didn't know there was a dairy. Really? Okay.
That's why so many closers there.
Yep. Okay.
I want to add Ian too. He's been having some issues when he works out, strains and stuff like that. It's causing some pretty massive headaches. He's got an MRI Tuesday.
Okay. Ian Hodge having headaches and things pertaining to his football exercises and stuff has caused a lot of things, and he's having an MRI. Is that what you said? This week. So let's keep him in your prayers. We'll be driving out after the memorial service Tuesday with Brother Bobby. We're going to probably head out that evening and drive part of the way to South Carolina, and I'll do that funeral out there on Thursday and come back. So if you would just kind of remember us while we're on the road. Okay. All right, let's pray, and we'll get started. Remember these. Put these on your prayer list this week. Yeah, we covered that. They didn't find anything in the heart cath, so they're not real sure, I guess, whether, I mean, they still say she had a heart attack, but it wasn't caused from a blockage. So I think they're going to run some more tests. Okay? Let's pray. Father, as we gather here tonight to study the Word, I pray that you would speak, Lord, to your people. God, that we might grow in our faith, in our understanding of who we are. God, I pray that tonight we would, Lord, come to that place where we learn to relinquish control to you, Lord, and let you do the things that you want to do in our lives, God. And we would trust you to do what is best and right in our lives, Lord. And help us, Lord, to make the right decisions and choices for this life. We do tonight lift up these we've mentioned, people like the Lively family, people such as those who are sick and in the hospitals, like Miss Barbara Washington's family. And for her, we pray for healing, Lord, to help her get off of that ventilator. And for Ashley, we do lift her up also. And Lord, these others that we've mentioned here tonight, for Miss Virginia, Lord, she's been having a lot of physical issues and with her balance. I pray, Lord, you'd help her with that, Lord. And then, Father, for us as we travel this week, we pray for that traveling mercy and grace, that you just watch over us as we're on the roads this week. And then, Lord, for all of these needs that we've mentioned here, Lord, there's just so many. And God, we'd ask that you would, Miss Patience, Lord, that you would, Father, just give her good reports when she goes back to the doctors this week, as well as Brother Ray. God, we pray that, God, something may come through. God, you might be able, Lord, to just touch him and do what the doctors and medicine can't do, Lord, in his body. He's been such a faithful servant. So, Lord, we just bless and ask that tonight, God, you just meet here with us. Make this such a deep and enjoyable time in our lives, Father. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay, let's watch this video. It's the synopsis of the book of Thessalonians. Okay?
Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians. This is most likely the earliest letter that we have from Paul, and the backstory for it is found in the book of Acts. It's where ancient Greek city of Thessalonica. And after just 1 month of telling people the good news about Jesus, a large number of Jewish and Greek people gave their allegiance to Jesus, and they formed the first church community there. But trouble was brewing. Paul's announcement of the risen Jesus as the true Lord of the world, it led to suspicion. So the Christians in Thessalonica were eventually accused of defying Caesar, the Roman emperor, when they said that there is another king, Jesus. And this led to a persecution that got so intense, Paul and Silas actually had to flee from the city, and this was painful for them because they loved the people there so much. And so this letter is Paul's attempt to reconnect with the Christians in Thessalonica after he got a report from Timothy that they were doing more than okay. They were flourishing despite this intense persecution. He designed the letter to have two main movements. First is a celebration of their faithfulness to Jesus, and then he challenges them to keep growing as followers of Jesus. And then these two movements are surrounded by three prayers. The letter opens with a thanksgiving prayer. The two movements are linked together by a transitional prayer, and then the whole thing is concluded with a final prayer. It's a beautiful design. Paul opens by giving thanks and celebrating the Thessalonians' faith, their love for others, and their hope in Jesus despite persecution. He goes on to retell the story of their conversion, how they used to be idolatrous polytheists, and they were living in a culture where all of life was permeated by institutions and practices that honored the Greek and Roman gods. And Paul talks about how they turned away from those idols to serve the living and true God, and that they're now waiting for the coming of God's Son from heaven. So in a city like Thessalonica, transferring your allegiance to the Creator God of Israel and to King Jesus, this came at a cost. Isolation from your neighbors, hostility from your family. But for the Thessalonians, the overwhelming love of Jesus who died for them and the hope of his return, it made it all worth it. Paul then retells the story of his mission in Thessalonica and of the dear friendships he formed with the people. He uses really intimate metaphors here. They treated him like their child, and he became like their mother and like their father. He says, "We were happy to share with you not only the good news from God, but our very selves, because we came to dearly love you." Paul reminds us here that the essence of Christian leadership is not about power and having influence. It's about healthy relationships and humble, loving service. He reminds them that he never asked for money. He simply came to love and serve them in the name of Jesus. And so Paul moves on to reflect on their common persecution. Just like Jesus was rejected and killed by his own people, so now Paul is persecuted by his fellow Jews, and the Thessalonians are facing hostility from their Greek neighbors. And Paul draws a strange comfort from knowing that together their sufferings are a way of participating in the story of Jesus' own life and death. Paul then shares about the anguish he experienced when he heard of the hardships the Thessalonians had after he and Silas fled. So he sent Timothy to support them and see how they were doing. And to his joy, Timothy discovered that they were going strong. They were faithful to Jesus. They were full of love for God and their neighbors. And they longed to see Paul as much as he longed to see them. And so Paul concludes with a prayer for endurance. And what's cool is that he introduces here the topics he's going to address in the letter's second half. He prays that God will grow their capacity to love, that he'll strengthen their commitment to holiness as they fix their hope on the return of King Jesus. So he opens the...
All right, we'll stop right there with those first three chapters. We're in chapter 3 tonight, and let's look at chapter 3 and what it says. I call it the model mission as they're understanding their purpose. This church was a church that Paul wanted to develop and make sure they fully understood their mission. They had a mission statement, if you will. I believe that churches ought to know their mission. They ought to know their purpose. They ought to know how they're going to impact their world. And every one of us play a part in that. But we know, I believe we know our mission statement here, but we maybe don't have, it's usually a little short statement of 8 or 10 words that basically says, this is who we are, this is why we're here, and this is what we're going to do. And some churches may be a little different from others in the sense that I know churches that do a lot in Christian education. For example, a Calvary Baptist Church over in Shreveport, and that's almost become the tail that wags the dog. It's almost become, it's just if sometimes they're reaching their community through their school is one of the big things they do, and so it's a big part of how they're reaching their community is through Christian education. And then there may be others who are going to do what they do through mission projects and social projects in their community. They're going to do a lot of little projects. They're going to get out in the community. They're going to run the concession stand at the school. They're going to run the concession stand at the Ouachita football stadium out here. And they're going to do ministry in those areas. And they're going to set up a soup kitchen. And they're going to have a clothes closet. And those things are great. They're wonderful things as long as you get the gospel into every part of it. Because it doesn't do any good to just give something to somebody if they don't know how to meet Jesus Christ. The whole purpose of a specific type of ministry is to kind of get your foot in the door, to develop goodwill with people so that maybe they'll stop and listen to what you have to say. But yet the primary purpose of any church has to be to get the gospel out there. You may do it in a lot of different ways, but we have to be faithful to get the gospel out there. And kind of a secondary purpose of any church is worshiping and growing together as the family of God. And that's really what Paul focuses on here in chapter 3, is what needs to happen at the church at Thessalonica if they're going to accomplish their mission and their purpose. And so let's look at that tonight. Beginning in verse 1 of chapter 3, we're going to see the first thing in your outline is, I control the screen. They're going to establish the family. They're going to establish the family, this family of God, this family of believers. And so that's kind of their purpose, is to develop it, to mature it by establish. To mature it. And so we're going to talk about that today. How do we establish it? Let's read the first two verses. Therefore, when we could no longer endure it, we thought it good to be left in Athens alone, and sent Timothy, our brother, to minister to God and our fellow laborer in the gospel of Christ, to establish you and encourage you concerning the faith. Now, what I want to talk to you about in this is how important that is, and if so, why was that so important that they become established in the faith? Why do you think that was so important? Why do you think Paul was concerned about that? Anybody? I got discussion questions on each point tonight. So, why do you think that's important?
Because it was all new to them, and there were a lot of false prophets, false witnesses.
Okay. There was a lot of false teachings out there. They needed to get established, to know what they believe. Anybody else? Persecution was coming, so they wouldn't quit. Anybody else? You see, that's our purpose. That word establish means to mature them, to stake them down so that, like when a big wind comes, you don't get blown away, When the wind of evil comes or the wind of false doctrines come, that you're stable and don't become blown away. Paul had a serious concern for them. He was worried about their, and I think Matt used this phrase last week when we mentioned it, Ephesians 5. It talks about growing in the faith. He says, look what it says beginning in verse 12 in Ephesians 5. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, yet you need someone to teach you again the first principles of the oracles of God. You've come to need milk and not solid food. For everyone who partakes in only milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But solid food belongs to those who are full of age, that is, those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. I might need these glasses. I'll put them on. And so what he's saying there in Hebrews, he was saying, listen, some of you have been saved for a good while, and I write to you, and I come back and visit you, and you ought to be teaching a Sunday school class by now, and instead you couldn't even tell me the story of Noah and the flood. You ought to be teaching a Sunday school class. You ought to be maturing others, and you've not matured yourself. If I came to you, and if you found out that Joe back there, Joe, can I use you as an example? If y'all went to Joe's house and you found out that Joe comes home every day and he puts on a diaper and he lays in the baby bed and he sucks a pacifier and he drinks a milk bottle, and that's how Joe spends his evening in the baby bed, you'd say, isn't that terrible? You'd say, isn't that terrible? Joe just had never grown up. He just had never grown up. And that'd just be horrible. That's what it would be like. But you know what? We see that physically and we see that literally in this world. But what about spiritually? It happens all the time. It happens all the time spiritually. And we don't think it's strange when it's spiritual. Here's somebody been saved 20, 30 years. Man, they couldn't teach a children's Sunday school class. If the devil was to come against them, he wouldn't have any trouble bringing them down. If they had too much trouble being a Christian, they'd just quit being one. And so we look at this, and Paul is saying here, just like he encouraged them to not be on milk, but move on to to the meats, move on to the mature foods. He challenges them in that because they needed spiritual development. What is spiritual development? What is that? How do we help develop somebody? Think about that tonight. How do we help develop people? There's two groups, I guess. One will be in the church, because there's some folks in the church who are just babes who need to grow up. And then there are some folks in the community that aren't even babes yet. They haven't been converted yet. So we also have a responsibility to grow them in the faith. But the first thing is we've got to win them to Christ, don't we? We must win them to Christ and then help them. And so Paul is saying we've got to teach these folks the truths, the deep things of God. If all you know, hear me now, let's make this very practical. If all you know about God is a few nice stories. Well, there was a Garden of Eden. There was an apple tree. We always say an apple tree, and the Bible doesn't say that. And this big snake came in there, and it told Eve, "Don't eat of that tree," and she ate of that tree, and it was bad. It was bad. I'm telling you, it was bad. And all we know is that, and we know about the Noah and the ark, and we're not really sure what it means, but we know that story. How are we ever? The first time some problem comes against our faith, are you going to be able to take the truths of those stories and apply it to your faith? Are you going to understand the story that, do you know that you serve a God who one day was in the winds, the storms was coming, and he could stand up and speak to the wind and tell it to calm down? Do you know, is that your God? Do you know how to trust that God? You see, we can talk about biblical stories, but until we develop faith, we've not done anything. We've not. You see, faith is what's going to drive you in the ground. Faith is what's going to cause you to. Have you ever seen a football player or somebody running track? They'll take their foot and they'll hit it in the ground. They'll dig their cleats in so they can take off in the starting of a race. Or if they're blocking on a line, they want to get a good firm stance. That's what faith is. Faith is that good stance against whatever comes against you. Man, they were facing persecution. They were facing pressure. Some of them were being kicked out of their families. Some of them were losing family inheritance. They were losing their jobs. There's all kind of things going on. And the persecution, just because they had given up the family religion or whatever that was. And so you can see all the trials that they were facing. And Paul was concerned about them because he knew it wasn't easy. He knew it wasn't easy, and he wasn't there, so he sent Timothy. And that's the next thing we see is Paul's commitment to them. His concern for them, his commitment to them. Paul wanted to make sure that they were there. He felt about them, like verse 2 says, like he was a brother to them. That same term was used back at the end of chapter 2. But Paul felt like he had a responsibility to grow them in the faith. And listen to me, folks, we ought to all feel that responsibility. Do you agree? Even if you're not a Sunday school teacher, we ought to feel that responsibility. What would that responsibility look like? Let's say you're not a deacon, you're not a pastor, one of the staff, you're not a Sunday school teacher. Do you have any responsibilities? What are they? Help me. Help me to know what you can do to help mature. Encouraging one another. Praying for each other. Boy, that's a big one, isn't it? Praying with each other. All right. Good. Tell them what God's done to help you through times. Because you know what? Almost every one of us here, if you've got a problem, I just about guarantee you somebody else in this church has had that problem before. And God put us together for them to share with you their struggle that they may help you get through something. And you know what? One day you're getting through it right now. One day you may be able to help somebody else who's going through that struggle. In fact, the Bible talks about that. God gives you grace that you may, and then you're supposed to pass that grace on to somebody else. In other words, God helps you with things that you may one day help others with those same types of things and give others the same grace that they need. Which it may entail forgiveness, it may entail help. There's a lot of ways grace is poured out in our lives. But what I'm saying to you is no matter who we are, we ought to look around at our family. if you've got a good, strong family and your family's close, you know when one of you hurt, all of you hurt. You know when somebody else, a brother or sister's in need or your children are in need, you're going to be there to help them, right? You're a good family. Family helps each other. Well, I'm going to tell you, so much more so the church ought to be there for each other. I'm going to tell you, if you hurt, I hurt for you. I have learned a few years back, several years ago, I should say, maybe 30 years ago, that I can't carry everybody's burdens. Because when I tried to carry everybody's burdens, I didn't sleep at night. I couldn't sleep. All I could do was turn those things over to the Lord, pray for them, encourage them, and then ask God's grace, upon them. And I couldn't do it for them. I guess what I'm saying. So there's some things we can do, some things we can't. We can't carry a burden for them. But sometimes you share a burden if you come sit down by somebody that's hurting. If they need a little money, maybe to pay a bill, if they need somebody just to put their arm around them and give them a hug, appreciate them, love on them, and sometimes it's just being there. You know what I've learned? I remember having a guy a while back told me at another church, he was a deacon and somebody was dying. He said, I said, you need to go see him. He said, I don't know what to say. I said, brother, it ain't about what you say. Most of the time, it's just about being there. It's just about being there and saying, I'm sorry. How can I help? What can I do? You can't touch people where they're hurting sometimes. Sometimes it's just simply being there, and the Holy Spirit's got to minister to people where they're hurting. If there's times you're going to say, can I go pick up some sandwiches for the family, or can I do something? Is there something you need done? Sometimes that means a lot. That means a lot just to tell somebody I'm here. But we have to ask ourselves the question, are we committed to the family? Does that make sense? That makes sense? Be an encourager to someone. Be there for someone. And Paul is saying that, and he's modeling that for us. So helping establish the family was so important. The second thing I want us to see in our outline tonight is, and by the way, so I said what Paul did for them was he sent them someone to minister to them. He sent them Timothy. Timothy and Titus were two young preacher boys learning. Paul was mentoring them, and they were kind of in that seminary of Paul, I guess, and Barnabas. And by the way, when I write these kind of things, I think about people that are good to that. Like Barnabas was a good example, which was an encourager, and he traveled with Paul some. But how important it is that there was somebody Paul could send out. So again, when we're talking about this, we're just talking about basically lay people. I mean, we're talking about people who were out fishing maybe one day, and the next day they're out there trying to tell people about the Lord. And so we all have that responsibility. All right. The second thing in our outline, expect some frustrations. It's not always going to be easy to serve God. What Paul stresses for us here is the struggle that comes in. And I appreciate, probably if I was writing the Bible, I'd probably write it like some of the preachers today. I'd say, once you have faith, everything's going to be great in your life. You're never going to have a problem. You're going to have prosperity. You're going to have great prosperity. In fact, you send me some money, and I'm sure you're going to prosper because of that. I'm going to prosper first, and maybe you will later. Right? Seed money. Give me some seed money, they call it. That's what they do. Seeds of faith. And but Paul is a realist here in verses 3 and 4. Let's read it. It says that no one should be shaken by these afflictions. What's Paul saying here? I'm here to encourage you. I'm here to establish you in the faith concerning your faith. And he goes on. This is a continued sentence here, okay? That no one should be shaken by these afflictions. For you yourselves know that we are appointed to this. Appointed to what? Appointed to what? Sufferings. We're appointed to some sufferings, some afflictions. We're appointed. Paul says, what did Jesus say? I've said it enough, so I'm going to start. Hey, y'all, when I repeat something, and some of you say, hey, I've heard him say that before, that means it's important. And the more we repeat it, the more hopefully you'll remember it. It'll become something you say, yeah, I got that verse underlined in my Bible. But what did Jesus say? Jesus said the world hated me. And if you follow real close, they're going to hate you too sometimes. And what does he mean? He means there's a portion of the people that you're going to meet in life who want nothing to do with God. They want nothing to do with the people of God. They want nothing to do with the ways of God. And therefore they live in rebellion to God. And so we look here, and Paul is saying to them, we're appointed to this thing. Now, there's other verses like over in the book of James chapter 1, we see that he talks about, he says, think it not strange when you face fiery trials and tribulations. Peter wrote about that, and James wrote about that. He says, don't think it strange. Realize it's coming. You're going to face some hardships. You know, in America, we haven't had a whole lot of hardships, have we? You don't drive through America and here's an idol store over here where they're selling idols of the fish god, and they're selling idols of this god and idols of that god, and we don't have a lot of the pervasive of idols in the sense of that way, but yet we got a lot of things that's more important to us than God. Yeah. That's right. It can be things like a hobby that you have. Anything that comes ahead of you serving God is an idol. You maybe can't buy one made out of gold in a store somewhere, but it's your God. It's more important than anything else you do. That is first, and you just give God what's left over. Hello? Does God get our best? Or does he just get what's left over? And so we have to ask that question in our lives. Let's look at the first thing. Why was he says, I want you to expect some frustrations because I want to stabilize you and stabilize those waverings. He doesn't want us to be like James says here. Listen to James 1, 2 through 8. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. That's right. I have problems and my tire blows out. And I have a wreck, and I run in a ditch, and I call somebody else to have a wreck, and now I'm facing all kind of financial problems, and I found out this week I have cancer, but I'm so happy about it. I'm just joyful about all my problems. Right? No. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying smile and be happy. He's saying just know that the devil's out there, and he's going to do everything he can to slow you down, to discourage you, to make you want to quit. And he goes on and says, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. Wow. I'm sure all of you go to bed at night praying for patience. Well, you can pray for that one back there. That's right. But patience. Here's what patience means. What does patience mean? You give me your definition of patience. Anybody? Being able to wait. Okay. Huh? Perseverance. Yeah. Long suffering. How about it's the opposite of anxiety. Patience is the opposite of just being an anxious person. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to handle this. I'm going to rob a bank. That's what I got to do. I got to rob a bank. And I don't have courage to rob a bank. I better go get high on crack cocaine so I can rob a bank. So then I have the courage to do that. I just don't know what I'm going to do. And we can patience means you can take it as the devil sends it and wait on God's deliverance. Devil, here's patience. Devil, you're not going to win. You're not going to win. I know you want me to cuss and throw a fit. I know you want me to just act like Christians don't act. Devil, I know you want to change who I am and make me act ugly. But guess what? Not working. Not working. I'm not going to act like that. And so we don't let him. I like to deal with emotions. Emotions is something that the world wants to control. The devil wants to control your emotions. You know what? We don't let the world and the devil control our emotions. In fact, we master our emotions. Patience says you're in charge. your emotions and the devil is not in charge of your life. When you're in charge, some of those fruits of the Spirit, not only love, joy, and peace, but there's things like self-control. Patience is one of those. And I know there's nobody here has a problem with that, has a problem with any self-control on those things, right? If any of you lacks wisdom, he said, let him ask of God who liberally without reproach will be given to him. Let him ask in faith, not doubting. And he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. Let not that man suppose that he'll receive anything from the Lord. He's double-minded, unstable in all of his ways. So in this one, we talked about stabilize those wavering. Sometimes we become waver. We're one thing on Sunday, we're something else on Monday, and we handle a problem good today, but we don't handle it very well tomorrow. We're just unstable, and least little thing can send us over the cliff. Second thing I want to read is there's a couple of them here, but Luke 21 was another one pretty good in that. It talks about before all these things. Here's what Luke 21:12 says. They will lay hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons. You'll be brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake, but it will turn out for you as an occasion for testimony. Therefore, settle it in your hearts not to meditate beforehand on what you will answer, for I'll give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries will not be able to contradict or resist. He's telling us there, the Lord's telling us there, there's going to be times that, I see us changing in our world. I literally think there is potential. I wouldn't have maybe thought this 15, 20 years ago. I literally think there's potential in my lifetime to go to jail for preaching the full gospel of Jesus Christ. In America. I mean, I've always known that could happen in Ukraine and other places, but I never thought it would happen in America. If the forces driving our nation today can get their way, it will make things iffy. And them jokers can come get me and lock me away. That's why, y'all wonder why I'm so fat. I may have to live on bread and water for a while, So I'm storing up. I'm storing up for that. All right. Second thing I want you to see is he wanted to strengthen those who were weak. Boy, Paul really felt for those who were weak. They weren't baby Christians because they were just hadn't grown up. We talk about these were new believers. Some of these were new believers. These were people who Paul felt a responsibility to help get them through what was going on. So his desire is to strengthen them. How do we strengthen the weak? I know I'm asking some questions that are just a little bit different, but how do we strengthen the weak? Exercise. Okay. That's a different kind of strength, but you're right. Spiritual exercises. Yeah. A steady diet of the Word of God, right, maybe? What else?
If you can't pray for God's healing on a cold, what makes you think you got the faith to pray when you got cancer? That's where you exercise faith.
Yeah.
Praying for the little things, the big things.
I don't know about you, but I need to see faith lived out in my life. I need to see it. I need to see the effects of faith in my life. I want to see the effects of faith in your life. You can sit in here and tell me anything in the world. But my friend, do we live that faith? Is faith how we make our decisions? What are we willing to do without to glorify God? What are we willing to do simply to glorify God? It's not for us. It's for Him. And so we think about that today. And I believe Paul, when he talked about these being weak and the persecutions that he knew they would face in those days, he knew that if they didn't strengthen, they may very well fall away. They may quit going. They may quit being a part of the church. The church there in Thessalonica could die. And Paul wanted to keep that family of faith going. I believe with all of my heart, one of the reasons the church needs to get so deep today is because if I'm right, and if persecution does come in the next few years, if we do face hardships, I mean, are you reading the stuff I'm reading right now? Huh? I'm reading stuff right now that they're wanting to put together commissions to look for people like us. They want to, they really believe we're a problem. Yeah, we should be. So was Paul. But they literally, are you going to be willing to stand when it's hard to stand? And so, I think one of the things that God is showing me in these days is the reason we must develop a strong faith is because it may come to a point that that's what we have to live on. It may come to a point they go back and find out stuff about me and this church or y'all, and they may want to come knock on your door. Oh, it looks like from some of the things you posted on Facebook, Mr. Larry. Mr. Larry, I noticed you've been in Facebook jail. How would you like to be in our jail? Homeland Security. Because we think you're a threat to the nation. We think you're a threat to the nation. And we know you're not. We know you're not. But if that helps set the agenda, you see, that's an agenda-driven thing. How many times have we heard in the last week, re-education, deprogram? We need to be deprogrammed and we need to be re-educated. Yeah. Feel my pain. I've been trying to re-educate this bunch for 5 years. It's about driving me crazy. I mean, no, I'm joking. All right. Look back in Acts chapter 17. If you got your Bibles, turn back to Acts 17, the first 4 verses. I want you to see Paul's plan for strengthening. The church at Thessalonica was one of those places. And we're about ready to take our break. If anybody, I don't know if anybody needs to get up and go to the break room, to the fellowship hall to help that be ready, but we're going to get out of here in about 2 minutes. Acts 17, the first 4 verses, it says, "Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And then Paul, as was his custom, went into them, and for 3 Sabbaths reasoned with them from the Scriptures." The word there for reasoned is a word that literally means to discuss or to debate with them about scriptural truths. Verse 3, "Explaining and demonstrating that the Christ had to suffer and rise again from the dead, and saying, 'This Jesus whom I preach to you is the Christ.' And some of them were persuaded, and a great multitude of the devout Greeks, not a few of the leading women, joined Paul and Silas." When I think about strengthening the weak here, I think about 4 things he says here. First of all, he reasoned with them. He reasoned with them. He sat down and discussed it with them. He debated with them truths, eternal truths. The second thing, he opened the Word. He opened up what the Scriptures were said. He taught them from the Scriptures, verse 2 says. If you're going to talk to somebody about truth, you can't do that without the Word. Hey, when you come to the house of God, you need your Bible. When you go to Sunday school, you need your Bible. We're here to study together. We're here to learn. Every one of us need a sword, and that's what the Word of God is. It's that sword of the Lord. We need that in our hands, and we ought to be learning from it and taking notes. And number 3, he alleged certain truths. He broke down truths to them. He said, "This Jesus I preach to you is the Christ." Let me tell you, if Jesus is the Christ, what else could be more important than that? Every one of us have to wrestle with that. Remember, Christ means He's the anointed one. He's the deliverer. If Jesus is the Christ, what could be more important than serving Him? Your job's not that important. You hear what I'm saying? It's not more important. Now, I think every one of us ought to do our job for the glory of God. I think every one of us ought to be the best employees that an employer has because of our faith. So I'm not knocking the jobs. I'm just saying to us that our job is not more important than God. If you had to choose between your money, your career, and serving Jesus Christ, which one would you choose? Now think hard. That's not an easy question, is it? But when it comes to reality of actually doing that, because we sometimes would struggle with that. Who knows, one day we may have to face that choice. So we have to decide what's most important in our life. And number 4, he preached to them. He preached to them. He taught them the things of God. And many of them joined him. In 2 Timothy 4:2, I'm going to read this and we're going to go. We're going to have our prayer. Let me read it to you. 2 Timothy 4:2. Okay. Yeah, what's 1 Timothy right after? Right? Let's see. Okay. Genius is born among us. 2 Timothy 4:2. Remember what Paul said to Timothy? He said, Timothy, preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Convince, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and teaching. So Paul met with them. He taught them. That's how they were going to strengthen the weak. They had a plan. Break open the word, pour it into them, and help them understand it. That's what it means when he said explaining it. So he said, that's how we're going to strengthen these folks. Okay? And so that's my goal. That's my goal. I know that's Wayland and Hughes and everybody's goal. Miss Dawn's goal with the children. I'm going to tell you something, folks. It starts when they're little bitty. Do you understand that your children, now this blew me away, James Dobson's organization, I read this years ago, that children develop many, if not most, of their values by the time they're around 3. They learn right from wrong. Some things are right, some things are wrong. There's a God. How do we make decisions? And children learn that at 3, by 3. My goodness, we have to start early, folks. And you show me a child that maybe never heard about God, mom and daddy never acted like they knew about God, and they haven't been taught anything at home. You know what? And you bring them into the family of God, and maybe they're a teenager, and it's a whole new world for them. And they may be like that horse that's already got his head out the gate. It's hard to get it back in. And so that's why we got to start early. And I got to teach mamas and daddies and grandparents so they can teach their little children. Because we can't teach them everything here. We're just trying to help you. And you got to teach them at home. Okay? All right, let's stand and we'll be dismissed to go over and have a snack and come back in here about 6:15. Okay? All right. Let's pray. Father, thank you for tonight. Thank you for what you're showing us. God, drive these thoughts into our heart. God, that we see the urgency of the hour. And God, as we fellowship together tonight, we know fellowship is so important in our spiritual development also. Bless our time together here, Lord. Thank you for the food and those that prepared it. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right. I got to hurry. I said, because y'all ate me out of house and home over there. We didn't get back till 6:30. So, I mean, I have people bribing me. Another piece of cake. Give preacher another piece of cake so we can stay longer. Ed. Somebody was over there saying, no, give preacher another biscuit or something, and he'll stay and won't go back in there. No, we didn't. Yeah, I did this morning. All right. The third thing we're going to look at today, the encouragement from a friend. Paul talks about part of the mission of this church was going to be encouragement. Boy, it kind of reminds me of being a healing place, doesn't it? that their ministry was to encourage one another. They wanted Timothy to be an encouragement. Let me get back over to Thessalonians. I had swapped it. Verse 5 says, "For this reason, when I could no longer endure it, I sent to know your faith, lest by some means the tempter," talking about the enemy, the devil, "had tempted you, and our labor might be in vain. But now that Timothy has come to us from you and brought us good news of your faith and love, and that you always have remembrance of us, greatly desiring to see us also, as we also to see you. Therefore, brethren, in our affliction and distress, we were comforted concerning you by your faith. For now we live, and if you stand fast in the Lord, for what thanks we can render to God for you, for all the joy with which we rejoice for your sake before our God, night and day, praying exceedingly, that we may see your face and perfect what is lacking in your faith." Perfect, that word, anytime you see the word perfect, usually in the Bible it means mature or complete, that we may complete you or mature you in your faith. Paul says one of the things that they were concerned about, that was them being encouraged there, because he knew the spiritual struggles that they face sometimes can be discouraging. Does the devil ever get you down, get you discouraged about things? Everyone needs a Barnabas sometimes. Over in Acts 4:36, we see where Barnabas, it says the name Barnabas means son of encouragement. Son of encouragement. When you may remember in Acts chapter 15, when Paul and Timothy had been in a discussion, and Timothy was about ready to quit. He'd had enough. And no, I'm taking that back. It wasn't Timothy. It was John Mark. I don't know why I said that. It was John Mark. He had been traveling with them, and he wanted to do his own thing. And he was just kind of tired of the journey, the missionary journey they were on. And Paul said, "That's it. Fine, go home." You know, basically, Paul could be a little frustrating sometimes with them, I'm sure. Barnabas said, "No, I think he needs to go with us. We need to keep him encouraged." And so the whole process boiled down to, basically it became such a conflict that Paul and Silas decided to part and go different ways. And Paul and Barnabas, I'm telling this story and not reading it, but Paul and Barnabas decided they'd been missionary partners, and Barnabas said, "I'm going to go this way, you go that way," and Barnabas said, "I'm going to take John Mark with me." And then if you go back and read a little later on, we find that Paul had such an influence on these young men that later on he's going back to them and ministering with them. And in fact, in Timothy's letter, he writes when he's in prison, he writes and says, "Send John Mark to me. He would be beneficial to me. And tell him to bring the parchments, to bring the scriptures." And so later on, John Mark came back, and he was a blessing to Paul. And why? Because Barnabas didn't give up on him. Barnabas would encourage him. And so these guys knew the importance of encouragement. Here, how does Paul encourage them? Well, let's look at a few of those things. First of all, he sends a pastor. He sends somebody to help them get organized, teach them the things that they needed to learn. And, Jeremiah 3:15 says God gives us pastors after His own hearts, our shepherds after His heart. Basically mean God knows what we need, I think, at times. I know in my life there's probably been times God has sent me somewhere maybe to deal with some of the issues that a church might be going through, to get them through that process. Sometimes people are good at like getting people through a process. My last church, in the 7th year I was there, we dealt with an embezzlement of almost $1 million over 7 years. Lost 2 staff members due to moral failure. All that happened in 1 year. And don't think that doesn't shake a church when all that happens in 1 year. And it was pretty much after that, it was tough. It was tough the last 3 years I was there after those things. But I felt like I was there to get the church through that time, and get the debt paid off. And we got the debt paid off, did a lot of renovations while we were there. There was certain things that maybe God puts us in certain places for certain times. And I think it means that after His heart, based on what God sees and what God knows. But I don't remember if it was Bill Robertson. Hugh's uncle, that made the statement, or he had gotten it from someone else, but the statement was that we need leadership in everything. The home has leadership. You know, the home, God gave us fathers in our home to be spiritual leaders in those homes. And a church needs leadership. But the statement that was made, I remember hearing for years, is anything that's got two heads is a freak. Anything with no head is dead. And everything needs a head. But it doesn't need two, and it doesn't need zero. And if there's no leadership in a church or wherever, then you get a battle for everybody trying to have their way. Everybody trying to take leadership. And so Paul knew one of the things this new church, particularly a new church, needed was someone to come in and just help them, just to help organize them, to teach them the things that they needed to learn. So he sent them Timothy. All right? The next thing, Paul would show passion to them. Verses 7 and 8. Again, he said, therefore, brethren, in all our affliction and distress, we were comforted concerning you by your faith. And so he talks to them about how now they're encouraged if they would stand fast in the Lord, and how they had stood fast in the Lord. So Paul says, he shows here his love for them. He says, I was concerned, but now I can relax. Basically, I can relax and rejoice over you guys. I think Paul felt for them like a shepherd maybe feels for his flock. That shepherd has a responsibility to keep that flock safe. He has a responsibility to make sure they are fed. They're in places where they can eat grass, and that they're safe at nighttime, and that he keeps them together. And that's kind of the agendas of a pastor. Paul considered himself their brother, their mother, their father. He was concerned about what would happen in this group of believers. And so he shows his passion for them by how he cared for them. And last of all, prayers. Paul showed his prayer. He sends up prayers for them, verses 9 and 10. He says, well, what thanks can we render to God for you? My joy and rejoicing sake before our God, night and day, praying exceedingly that we may see your face and perfect you in what is lacking in faith. So Paul is, to show that Paul cared for them, here's three ways that he showed his love, his efforts to make sure they were ready to face the future. Any questions about that? I want you to know I can deal with how Paul is what Paul is talking about. I pastored a church one time, and when I pastored over here in Monroe, and I left and went to Georgia, and I got to Georgia, and I began to get phone calls from people, and a church that we loved very, very much, and felt like we had. You may not understand this, being a pastor. I think Brother Whalen, some of them understand it, but I went there and the church had 25 people. And when I left there, we were running 200 in worship. And a new pastor comes in, and in a year, they're back down to 50. You know, and people are calling you, and they're crying, and the church there's things happening, and I'm not blaming it all on the pastor. I don't know why it all happened. I'm just saying you weep with them when that happens. You feel like you invest your life in a church, in a ministry, and then you feel like it's just gone. Same thing has happened in Georgia. Church where I left over there was running 700 when I left. Today they may very well have to sell their buildings. They may very well move out. Pastor stayed there till they couldn't pay his salary anymore, and then he found him somewhere else to go, left it with them. And that just rips your heart out, because you just see people's lives changed. I say that, though, to say this, too. I've been working in Ukraine now for almost 20 years. And in Ukraine, I long to see those people. You may not fully understand that unless you've been involved in a ministry somewhere else, too. And I just want to go back. I talked to them on email and text and stuff like that today, and Facebook, and they tell me what's going on, and I just want to get back over there. I want to get back over there and hold their hand and pray with them and see if they're okay and see what can be done to help. The other day I was just trying to help raise a little money for them to go. We take medicine and food into the occupied territory where we did all our work. Russia's taken that over now in eastern Ukraine. And it's such a burden for me, for them. I feel a little bit of what they're agonizing with right now, to have lost their church property, The government just took everything, and they're struggling. They're struggling to survive. And so I feel for them. I hurt for them. And so I understand a little bit about what Paul is saying here about this church in Thessalonica. Okay? Let's move on to the last thing because our time is short tonight. Exhorting, well, again, that's one of the questions I was going to mention. What can we do to be an encouragement to others? Paul showed that. We talked about that a little earlier, writing letters and calling people and helping somebody maybe when they're in a bind financially and whatever we can do to minister. Exhorting their faithfulness was the last thing. Exhorting their faithfulness. Paul talked to them about being faithful. There are 4 ways Paul wants them to be faithful in love and ministry, and they're verses 11 to 13. Now may our God and our Father himself and our Lord Jesus Christ direct our way to you. And may the Lord make you increase and abound in love to one another and to all, just as we do to you, so that he may establish your hearts blameless in holiness before our God and Father at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ with all his saints. Paul here points them to faithfulness and endurance, if you will, to the end. One of the unique things about the book of Thessalonians and the letter that Paul writes to them here, it's really a book about it. A lot of it talks about eschatology, or the return, the second coming of the Lord. Some of the people, one of the problems in this church was that people were thinking, they had in their mind, the Lord's coming back tomorrow, today. It's just obvious to us that the Lord's coming back. And so some of them had even gone to the extremes of quitting their jobs and selling their homes, not planting any crops, and just sitting down and waiting on the Lord to come. They just moved out in the wilderness, like you've heard of some of these cultic groups over the years, selling everything, going up on a mountain and wait for some comet to come by and some spaceship to come by and pick them up. Well, Paul is addressing that, but in essence here you see he's addressing them not quitting everything. And to them that they may establish their hearts blameless in the holiness of our God, and that they would continue to increase and abound in love to one another. So in other words, not just give up and quit and sit there and wait on the Lord to return, but to keep after things, keep doing the ministry. And so 4 things here I mentioned that ways that Paul's exhorting them. Paul desired to love on them. In verse 11, it tells us he just couldn't wait, and he's praying that the Lord would make it possible for them to come back that way, that they might see them again. As I said, I pray that for the Ukraine, that I get a chance to go back over there. Right now, COVID, I don't even think they would let me in the country. I know I'll probably have to have a shot to go back, and so I may have to take a shot just to get to go back, to travel. Huh? It's been 2 years. This year makes 2 years since I've been there. So, but Paul has a desire to go be with them, verse 11, and just to show his love to them. Second of all, Paul desires them to love on each other. He says, yes, I want to come love on you, but I need you to love on each other. May the Lord make you increase and abound in love to one another. I know we've discussed this somewhat in this tonight, but you remember Jesus said in John 13:35, he said, by this shall all men know that you're my disciples, that you have love one for another. What a challenge for us to love each other. Explain that love to me. Somebody explain what that love among us, loving each other, what does that look like? Makes the church closer, okay. Sunday morning. Pretty close to what it looks like, okay. Sorry? An unconditional love. Yeah. One big family. But specifically, let me give you an example. I think that love looks like forgiving one another. Did you? Forgiving one another. That's loving each other. What's another thing we're to do for one another if we love each other? Because, and I say forgive each other because sometimes we're going to get on each other's nerves. Huh? When your kids aren't acting like they're supposed to act. Hello? Or when you made a mess over there on that table and just got up and walked off and left it? Huh? I know this morning I'm trying to forgive somebody. If I can ever find out who left that dirty coffee cup sitting on that table and I had to throw it away, I'm having trouble forgiving that. I had to get the mop out and mop the floor. People spilled coffee all over the floor this morning, and I'm thinking about not coming the next 2 Sundays just because I'm mad. You know, we can be real silly. We can be real silly, can't we? What else? What are other ways that we can love each other? Feed each other. Well, we really got love there, ain't we? We got some super love. Huh? Okay. When somebody in the family needs a little help. By the way, Miss Linda that sits back there, Taylor. Linda Taylor has breathing problems. She's got 2 or 3 trees down in her yard, and sometimes when it dries out here in the next week or two, we're going to go down there and get them limbs, get them trees out of her yard. Miss Virginia right over there needs somebody to fix the skirting under her trailer. A few pieces of that's come off. You know what? You go over and help Miss Virginia fix her skirting. Guess what? You just told her you loved her. You just showed her you loved her. And it's easy to say you love somebody. It's something else to show you love somebody. Amen? How about loving somebody is just calling them and just saying, hey, you was on my mind. And I prayed for you today. And I don't know why, but God just put you on my mind. I'm going to tell you, when somebody does that to me, or Linda Gale sends me a card, those kind of things just says, I love you. Amen? Yeah. How about if you just don't say anything, but just listen when somebody comes talks to you? Got time. Yeah, she does. And she don't tell me to share them neither. Sugar-free fried pie. So that means they only go to diabetic people. And I'm the only one on the hill. That's what that means.
You know, I know what you're talking about because this Margie calls me every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I look forward to her calling.
Mm-hmm.
Because she encourages me.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what it is, she's going to make it all right for me. And at the end, she's always going to say, God is good all the time.
Mm-hmm.
God is good.
Yep.
And I look forward to her calling every day.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's encouraged.
Yeah. Okay, so these are things. Do what now? Oh yeah, love. Iron sharpens iron, doesn't it? Love will hold us accountable. That's right. Well, that's the verse we read there a while ago, and we talked about the godly love. Number 3. Look what it says. Paul desires for them to not only love each other, but to love everyone. That's our challenge to our mission, to our commission, to go into the streets and to go to the people that live right by the church and the people who have a problem in town who we could minister to. You know, I don't think we struggle too much with loving each other right here, right now. But I wonder, do we struggle to love everyone right now? Hello? Do we struggle with it? I mean, let's just be honest. Let's give ourselves a grade. And this is kind of evangelism, isn't it? It's really a type of evangelism where we love this community and we try to minister to this community. Sometimes we don't mind loving on each other, but we might mind loving on them people that live over there. Am I pointing at Lisa's house? I wasn't trying to, Miss Lisa, but I might have been. Your point is? That may be where we struggle the most, isn't it? Yeah. You have a problem with loving liberals, right? Boy, they need Jesus, so don't they? But loving them don't mean I have to compromise with what they believe. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes I don't mean it should hurt, but I mean the truth is not something we compromise. Compromise is not love. Do you hear me? They may have to compromise on a bill in Washington, D.C., but when it comes to truth, we don't compromise on truth. We we have to stand for that truth, but speak that truth in love, and that's the hard part. So I'm saying to you, God desires us to love everyone. 1 Corinthians 13, see if I got that up there. Yeah, it says this. I don't know if you can read it. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, that's for those who would speak in tongues. But if I don't have love, I'm like a clanging brass or sounding brass and clanging cymbals. In other words, it's about like beating on them cymbals up there. It don't mean nothing. I'm not saying to you that what you do don't mean nothing. And though I have the gift of prophecy, I can stand up and prophesy. I understand all the mysteries. You don't understand the mystery of God? Come ask me. I can tell you all about it. And have all the knowledge. And though I have all faith, I can move mountains. But if you don't have love, you're nothing. Nothing. And that doesn't just say, this is not just about love for our church family. This is about loving in the world. You know, one of the greatest things can be said about us when you go to work is that, man, that guy or that lady is full of love. I mean, you just can't be around him or her very long without seeing that they're a loving person. You know, when people say you're a loving person, that means I need to listen to that person. What makes them different? Why should I listen to them? And verse 3, and though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, I just give everything away. I run soup kitchens all over town. And though I give my body to be burned, in other words, I'm willing to be a martyr. But if I don't have love, it doesn't mean a thing to me. It profits me nothing. God puts love pretty high, doesn't he? He puts love really high. And then last of all, Paul desires them to love God in holiness. How do I love God in holiness? Can anybody tell me that? It's one thing to say you love God. To imitate God is something totally different. I mean, if you are imitating Christ, if you are trying to live a holy life, you know what that says to God? You love me. Look at those verses I put up there. John 14:15. If you love me, Jesus said, keep my commandments. Matthew 16:24, Jesus said to the disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. In other words, if you say you love me and you want to follow me, follow me. Take up your cross. Follow me. Obey me. Imitate me, is what he's saying there. So, I'll leave those thoughts with you today. That God says there's all these ways I'm challenging you to love me. Now, we end chapter 3 here today, and the first 3 chapters kind of is the segment where he talks to them about their ministry and encourages them. Some of the stuff we're going to talk about, as y'all know, chapter 4, we're going to talk a little bit about the second coming. It talks about the Lord coming back. And so the theme of the book of Thessalonians changes a little bit in chapters 4 and 5. But these first 3 have really, he's challenged them about how to love, how he loves them, how to grow in their faith, how to keep going, how to not give up, and how to keep being effective against the enemy. Okay? And one of the greatest tools that we have is love. All right? If we can just love, it'll solve almost everything else. And you know what I mean by love? I mean a godly love. A love that we love each other. And, okay, any questions or comments before we go? Okay, if not, let's stand and we'll be dismissed. Thank y'all for coming tonight. All right. Let me get somebody to dismiss us. Mark, would you dismiss us?